of interim here, and I have a tale to tell. One of a city with its records of its origin intact. More specifically, how the generators were built. Well, keep listening and you shall find out.
Personal Journal of Euphemia McLaughlin, Assistant Engineer at Imperial Exploration Company. It's been 5 weeks since we have left the familiar walls of Birmingham behind. Weeks of uncertainty, of struggle, of hope. And finally, we have reached the shores. We had 3 deaths so far. Or small price for progress, as IEC'd called it. I can only hope I am going to avoid their fate. They've claimed there was nothing to fear, that this whole journey of ours was just a precaution. But now, it feels like the weather is changing. And the winter seems inevitable.
They crossed the rough northern seas to reach Site 113, where they were to build the greatest marvel of technology, a generator. His crew, lured by the promise of a steady job and eager to leave the work riots and bread queues behind, were somewhat taken aback by the sight of the desolate landscape surrounding the site. They were told not to ask for details. And there was no turning back. There was no consensus why that contract had such a high priority, considering the deteriorating situation of the Empire. But his superiors were clear. This was the most important job of his life. For Queen and Country! The first things that were needed was docks, the resources gathered from them, and a food source. Yes, there needed to be a basic infrastructure around the construction sites. Although before that, a gathering post was built near a large pile of resources, wood and steel specifically. And a workshop was built to research the docks. Although to do that, much of the roads already built needed to be dismantled, so that there was enough wood for a road to the generator. As for the construction site itself, all it was a gaping hole with some supplies around it. As for the law of the administration, whether it was there was a choice between gruel and hearty meals, and this overseer was
Everybody, new regulations.
not one to sow discontent and demotivate. Although a cookhouse wasn't his priority at this point. It was interesting that each generator started with making a large hole. As for structures, only those that let us just say that it required the structure to be relevant to construction for it to be allowed within a certain distance close to the hole. As for the Imperial Exploration Company, they at least made a start on the generator site and left some supplies to help work on the rest. How nice of them. As for the other buildings, such as tents and a workshop for researching things like the docks, which at this point the Overseer was about to do. That had to be built outside of the construction site part of the to put it in simpler terms, and to make sure that I'm well inside the ring, construction relevant buildings only. Outside the ring, everything else. Most of those who could work were sent to work on gathering. Although, at least 90 would need to be gathered. In order to build the tents. Rather make the tents for the workers to live in and not work in. Because by this point, the cold hadn't arrived proper. It was a comparatively blistering 10 degrees Celsius. Yes, hard to imagine considering what we've already been through. There was also greenery all around. Hard to imagine, isn't it? Considering that the only greenery that we're familiar with at this point is in food production. Also, to complete the essential research, it required much of the day. First to construct the workshop, and then to have the research be done. And after that, it was time for some food production. And in this case, it will be quite different. And considering that it was near the end of the work shift, it would be a good idea to have the tents made, or at least made a start on it so that they could set them up and then well, get some sleep so that they're fresh enough for the next work shift.
Time, take a breather.
There was barely enough wood to complete the housing, although there was the problem of food. There was a pile of coal to the south, or was it the north? The workers were lacking something to do. Whether it be work on the generator itself or something to do during their time off. It was nothing the Overseer could do anything about on that day. Actually, the coal was to the north, considering the seas were to the south, and that everyone who came here came due north. I hope I made sense there. This job certainly didn't make sense to workers already there at that time. one thing that did make sense is they had somewhere to sleep for the night, which lowered discontent. Something which you do not want to have a lot of. I speak from personal experience. The Overseer examined the other things that could be researched and, well, there was something that he thought would be needed sooner rather than later. But that would have to wait until the next day. Because it was outside the work shift. And the workers can't. Well, you could try getting them to work continuously, but it was likely to kill them. And the next law that the administration signed was for a pub.
Listen, everybody. New regulations.
And one of the workers wanted to call this pub the Home. How fitting.
Shake a leg. The shift's on.
This Overseer recognized the need for distractions when not working. And a pub was certainly a good way to start. Even at this early point in the construction process. Since the workforce was in need of food, and there would be no good half-starved, a cookhouse was constructing. An engineer at this point was apparently mistakenly assigned to a worker's tent. He requested to be moved to an engineer's tent. The Overseer did so, even though he knew it would be an unpopular decision. He prioritized motivation at this point, and to ignore this engineer's request would be something that which would reduce motivation. Whether or not this attitude would serve him as well as that later, well, we shall find out. And at this point, a dock spurs. The docks were constructed. Well, one of them anyway. Because the supply of wood was getting rather short. Wood would be needed for a number of things. Research, certainly at this point. Coal at this point is not a priority, largely because it was warm enough not to need it. And with the cookhouse built, food was prepared. And at this point, food production could be worked on, although the next thing to be researched ended up being the sawmill. Because having a supply of wood from the docks is a good thing. Having more of it would be even better. And it would also clear some space for more buildings. Also a good thing. As for how foraging would work, well, I will get to that once. Well, the docks were constructed and were assigned to bring in wood. They would bring in piles of supplies in. Requiring well, workers to gather them. The most efficient way at this point was with gathering posts. And around the same time, a pub was constructed. Something which would please the workforce. And increase their motivation to get this done. Although he noticed something was missing from... Oh yes. It was then that the assistant engineer recommended a telegraph station be constructed. That would be done in time.
Stow your tools.
more wood was needed for the foraging party, so that would have to wait until the next day. As for the next law to be signed, well, a chapel would not go in amiss. And that was what was missing.
Hear me! New rules in effect!
There are a few who are more religious than... well... they needed a place of worship, and one would be provided. Well, it would need to be provided sooner, rather than later. Although the more immediate structures are built to provide happiness and increase the motivation to the workforce would be a pub. Yes, just what they need. To achieve a state of mental incompetence. And with that promise fulfilled, motivation increased and discontent all but disappeared. As the Hole's first customers... Actually, that sounds wrong, doesn't it? And no, I'm not going to say explicitly what. Although it was too late to have more than just a few. Although that would change the next day. Because it would be open for the full duration. Well, as long as it doesn't disrupt their work during their shifts, it wouldn't be a problem. Well, that overseer certainly thought so, along with his assistant engineer. Someone who gave some pretty good advice. The situation was getting to the workers. They needed something to do during their time off. Thankfully, the overseer was way ahead of them. The pub was constructed, and the chapel. At some point within the next 2 to 3 days will be next. As for how the next few days would turn out, well, that's to follow. Well, if you're patient to listen to the rest of the accounts that have
Rise
gone
and
over,
shine.
you
We've
should
got
be
work
patient
to
for
do.
this one. The infrastructure was coming together, although more would be needed, both in resources and in numbers. workings to